There's been a lot of bad press around Total War Troy, but I love talking about great bits in games. I find people are so much more passionate about things they love than things that they just don't really care about. I have no affiliation with Total War. I wasn't even one of these YouTubers that got an early key or a free copy, meaning that I haven't even played it yet. But from what I've seen, from all the gameplay and the news, I think there are some things that could make a massive difference to the franchise. Because all aside, all the company issues and the things that you think about Epic Games and all that stuff, for the actual mechanics and the game itself, I think there are some really potentially amazing additions to Total War Troy that could come back in later games for the franchise. So this is why Total War Troy may be better than you think. It is finally out. After 2 years of work, my debut single is here. You can stream it on all platforms and of course go and watch the official music video over on my YouTube channel. So click the links below and go and stream the hell out of Exile. Now, in a nutshell, I think the game has the potential to be amazing. It has some issues, which we'll get onto in the second half of the video, but I do feel like it's getting a lot of slack because people are treating it like a mainline Total War game, which clearly it's not. Not only because of the Saga's name in the title, but the features and the gameplay style. You see, the Saga's games are more than just Creative Assembly wanting to focus on a particular and detailed period in time. They're a tester for the mainline Total War games, new ideas that Creative Assembly want to implement and aren't quite sure how they'll work in practice. And what better way to do this than add it to a lesser series, so the hit isn't quite as hard if it doesn't quite work out. We saw it in Thrones of Britannia, and it is no different in Total War Troy. Experimentation at its finest, and this means for some interesting gameplay that you will soon find out. First of all, CA Sophia are the studio in charge of the work on Total War Saga's Troy. This is a good baseline to start figuring out just how successful this game could be. CA Sophia are one of the newer studios over at the company, and for a few years they've been making updates and DLCs for the one and only Total War Rome 2, bringing in new features, factions, and of course, all the fixes in the world. And now, I don't know if you've noticed, but there are plenty of similarities between the settings of both games. You know, sword and shield combat, similar weapons and designs. All of this will aid in the jump over to creating a world that spans the 10 years of the Trojan War. Now, whilst there are these similarities between the game, admittedly you're going to find some interesting additions, or should I say deductions, from Total War Troy compared to the other games in the series. You see, this is the furthest back Total War has ever been. It's the Bronze Age, meaning there will be a lack of cavalry, focusing more on the melee troops and infantry with some chariots to fill in the rosters. But this absence of a mass cavalry force means an interesting twist to the soldiers on the ground. Infantry is now divided into heavy, medium, and light, something not uncommon with the Total War games, with heavier troops being a bit slower, but having stronger armor and more weapons than their light counterparts. However, there has never really been this vast juxtaposition between the light and heavy troops like there is in Troy. Scouting or light troops now move fast, and I mean really fast, using their speed to take the place of the horse that once were, having inbuilt buffs to their attacks and morale when doing actions such as flanking or distractions are used, having speed bonuses to get around troops whilst heavy soldiers in the centre hold the line. Having this massive difference gives a severe abundance of variation throughout the infantry, and whilst it may have a bit of a learning curve if you've played other Total War games and are used to using cavalry this way, I think the maneuvers and formations that you're going to be able to pull off will be much more interesting and flexible because of it. Now, I don't think it comes as a surprise that Creative Assembly are not shying away from the mythological side of Total War Troy. They've been doing it for the last few years, looking into more fantasy rather than focusing on the historical side. Even games like Three Kingdoms, which were based in history, brought in the heroes and the romantic side of history and the myths around it. And this is no different in Troy. I mean, after all, there's never been 100% definitive proof of all the battles and the war, or even the people that fought it. Most of it is just, yeah, we think we found a city about the right time in the right place of Troy, or yeah, Paris and Hector probably did this time, or yeah, we do want to add in Achilles, but we should probably turn Patroclus into his cousin rather than his lover, because I'm not sure people would buy into that Brad Pitt is gay sort of thing in this movie. You know, sort of non-specific things like that. After all, CA has made it clear they're using Homer's Iliad as a baseline for what they create, what's real, what's not, and how to blur the lines between the two. Much like Three Kingdoms, we get legendary units, the heroes that lead the armies, Achilles, Paris, Hector, and much like in Three Kingdoms, they are highly powerful units, giving buffs throughout the battles and being able to take on whole units at a time. Additionally, there are troops based on the stories of old with centaur riders, minotaurs, and myrmidons. But as I said, CA are trying to find that balance between the truth of these stories and what they are actually talking about. So instead of actual centaurs and minotaurs, they're just men on horses and big men with bull horns on their head. Furthermore, the vast amount of heroes and gods and the features that come with them go in to take over the campaign. The campaign in which we're going to next. The campaign of Total War Troy may, on the outside, look similar to past Total War games or other games in the franchise, but that couldn't be further from the truth. As I mentioned at the start of the video, CA want to experiment, test out new things, and as you'll find out, even bring back some of the old classics when it comes to game mechanics. In the game, you'll find a number of resources. In the past, it's mostly been gold, used for trading, recruiting troops, mercenaries, constructing buildings, that sort of thing. And this was somewhat expanded upon when it came to Three Kingdoms with the introduction of population as a mass aspect of growth, having the effects on the economy of your faction. But once again, Troy pushes this even further. You now have food, wood, stone, bronze, and gold. Food and wood are used for constructing buildings in the early game, additionally for recruiting and training the troops that you're going to need to start with. Of course, these resources alone can only take you so far throughout your campaign. Then, you're going to start needing the stone and bronze to start processing and utilizing the more advanced units and structures when it comes to the mid/late game. And of course, gold. This is the main resource for gaining a foothold in not only the economy, but for complete control. With gold, you're going to be able to keep up an army, recruit agents which will help you along the way, making friends and crushing enemies, or even bribing your way to the top. But here's where they start to link up a little. You see, this is the Bronze Age. The majority of the weapons, armor, and vessels were made from, strangely enough, bronze. But this valuable alloy is finite. Once in control of the bronze, you're going to have to hold it, trade it, use it for leverage, stopping the enemies from building up armies, or even aiding your friends into sporting vast phalanxes of hoplites into war. But it wasn't just the resources that were inspired by Three Kingdoms, but the diplomacy as well, being able to get yourself in, or more importantly out, of sticky situations with the resources that you claim, or even just your own silver tongue. Now, I did mention the myths that leak into the campaign itself, and throughout this you'll find gods to be a massive factor, gaining favour and trying not to anger them, which is probably your best course, as you're going to need their help to be successful in your conquests. Devoting to certain gods will give you specific buffs for your factions and armies. For example, spending time providing for Ares will provide your troops with morale boosts in battle, and aid in building and maintaining armies. This is also a hint back to the temple mechanics of Rome 1, where you could build certain temples to certain gods, where you'll gain their favour, giving you advantages throughout your campaign. Not only this, but holding areas like Mount Olympus will give you more buffs and help you gain favour for the gods. Additionally, the heroes come into play when we speak of the gods. Playing as Hector will give you an advantage in upkeep, campaign movement, and morale. The more regions that you have controlled by your allies will help you boost all these things. He also has a skill called Priam's Heir, which is a skill shared with Paris. With this, doing tasks and objectives for Priam will gain you renown, and you may eventually even become king of Troy. He is more of a defensive and diplomatic play style. Speaking of Paris though, who also of course has Priam's Heir, has the ability to interact with Helen of Troy. She is actually a physical unit or piece on the map. Depending on where she is can affect his gameplay and also affects the regions around positively or negatively. This depends on if she's captured or how well she's looked after or even how far away she is from Paris himself. So yes, playing as Paris will give you the ultimate simp-style gameplay. Other Trojan heroes include Aeneas, who can accept missions to earn favour by the gods by raiding regions, killing characters, making peace, or even declaring war. He can even speak to the dead. Yeah, I know, it sounds mental, but he can communicate to dead heroes, including the ones that have died throughout your game, so you'll get more information to help in his ventures. And then there's Sarpedon, a guy who makes his way through trade, raking in the cash to bribe, build, and bury his enemies. Making or breaking, bartering, and trading deals between other factions as well. He is the master of all resources. Unfortunately though, it isn't all gold and glitter for Total War Troy. In fact, there is good reasons why there is a lack of interest or distaste for the up-and-coming Total War game. Epic Games and that debacle aside, there are no naval battles, which is a shame. When two armies clash at sea, they just disembark at the nearest land and duke it out there. Now, I see why Total War have done this, as they've had a history of dodgy naval battles, but it would be nice to see them finally address and fix these issues instead of just leaving them out, as they have in the last few games. Furthermore, modding support won't come until September. Yeah, less than a month after launch, but it's always nice to start getting mods in straight away, especially for the developers, but I'm not sure how much of a big issue this one is. But the main thing lies in the multiplayer. It has now been announced that it's been delayed until November, 3 months after the launch, and let's be honest, the Total War multiplayer normally doesn't stay active for longer than 3 months, even in a mainline game. Maybe they're actually making it worthwhile, implementing back the reasons that Rome 1 had such a big multiplayer base, sorting out the problems that caused all the recent games in the series to lack any of this multiplayer community, but I guess only time will tell on that one. Overall, I kind of wish they'd just gone full mythical, taking some inspiration from Age of Mythology, mixed with the Warhammer games that they've been doing recently, using god powers in the battles and mythic beasts to take to the plains and sieging the gates of Troy. But instead we have this strange middle ground which doesn't quite know if it's based in history or mythology. But with all its flaws, I do believe that Total War Troy has some cool and new features it can bring to the franchise, and maybe, just maybe, they might be able to bring the series back from its slight downwards hill that they seem to be drifting. But hey, I guess we'll find out that and more on August the 13th and the release of Total War Sagas Troy.